perspectives on, where we're giving the world a voice. I am Lyra Lane White, your host. This this is our monthly Women's Laboratory. Today's dialogue is packed with reflections from this week's events and some serious conversation on the long-term impacts for women, particularly women of color. In an unprecedented move of Congress, we were able to get a new Supreme Court justice within 6 months of a presidential election. The questions of that justice's perspective on Roe versus Wade were a major concern to women's rights advocates. And additionally, we were able to elect a new female vice president. And so all of these issues are issues of relative concern. And we have some leaders here in the movement tonight that will definitely add to a robust conversation about what we want to talk about for tonight's Women's Laboratory. And we have joining us tonight, as a matter of fact, 3 women who are not only members of the clergy, but definitely have a perspective on this week's events. We're going to start out by allowing them to introduce themselves to you. Dr. Thurmond Malone, why don't you start? You're one of our regulars. And for those of our viewers who may not be familiar with you, just introduce and tell a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I am Reverend Dr. Myrna Thurmond Malone. I am the clinical director of MHT Family Life Center. I started the organization because there was a lack of resources for women of color when it comes to mental health, among other things. I'm also the regional director of spirituality with Signature Healthcare and adjunct professor at Grand Canyon University.
Awesome. Dr. Minter, you are new to our panel, and I'm excited to have your perspective this evening. Why don't you talk a little bit about yourself and your contribution to your ministry?
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Reverend Dr. Renee Minter. I'm coming in from New York. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I am an advocate for mental health. I have a private practice. I also work for non-for-profits. Right now I'm working with marginalized citizens, right now working with those who are abusers of substances and trying to fight the battle of opiate addiction. Very much interested in what's going on with the Supreme Court. As you know, yesterday we were looking at Obamacare. So I'm very happy to be here today to add my voice to the conversation.
And we are indeed blessed and glad to have you this evening. This conversation begs to just take a moment and just kind of take in the atmosphere of having elected this new vice president-elect. The implications of that on American culture are, I don't want to use, well, I can use the word astounding. They are outstanding, and we have high hopes for what this means for women in the American culture. I open up the floor for your reactions to that. I mean, we've had a few days now to kind of exhale and take it all in, but now with some perspective, we can kind of focus on what this really means in the long run. Anybody?
Is that for me, or is that for everyone?
That's for it. We just kind of let the conversation flow, Dr. Minter. We don't,
Okay. All right. Well, if I may, I think that we're probably living in a tale of two cities. The worst of times with the COVID going on, but this is actually the best of times for American women, and particularly women of color. We are seeing not just the election of the vice president, but also we're seeing along the map of the United States, we're seeing women of color coming forward as mayors, which we never saw before. And this is such an exciting time. And I'm excited not for my generation
Yeah.
and not for the generation after mine, but for my grandchildren, because they are setting the tone. And our grandchildren, who knows, my granddaughter or your granddaughter may be the next Supreme Court justice. So this is a very, very exciting time.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Anybody else?
Well, just dealing with the fact that they wanted to rush Justice Barrett in, and she was in 8 days before election after 50 million voters have voted. I think is hypocrisy, especially when President Obama, I think he was 9 months out of the election and they didn't allow him that same fortitude. So from my perspective, I think we are living in the best of days as far as having the first African American or woman of color as the VP, having Joe Biden in there, knowing that he's going to push for an initiative for women's rights is big for me. But I also think we need to look at the harm that it's going to do after they replace RGB with Barrett, based on her record.
Now, I'm going to be controversial here and say that I am very much a liberal. My views are very, if you want to say nouveau riche, all those adjectives that they attach to people who may or may not necessarily have socialist views. But I'm not. I don't know if I think it was very unprecedented for Congress to do what they did. But at the same time, I think in a lot of ways, these moves have worked almost in favor of. I'll give an example. And Reverend Holeness, I'm gonna let you talk in a second. I'll give you an example. So President Trump, there were two males. Okay, so now the Supreme Court is 6-3 in favor of conservative, the Obamacare. Okay, and this pre-existing condition issue. The president was trying to do was to eliminate Obamacare altogether.
Yes.
But when the question came up this week about whether or not they should strike down Obamacare, the two that he put on were the two that said, well, I don't know. We might need to keep, maybe we need to eliminate the mandate, but we probably need to keep Obamacare. And this was not the first time, that they didn't do exactly, So it kind of puts me in the mindset of that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the king throwing the two in the, throwing the three, and then he's looking, he says, wait a minute, I thought I put 3 in, and now I see 4.
Exactly.
So it's one of those types of situations where you mean it for one thing, but guess what? God's got another plan. So, but Reverend Reverend Holeness, what is your perspective on this? I mean, it's got to be.
I'm a millennial, so I'm in that millennial age range, and I think for me, because I'm just 30, so I'm at the beginning of my 30s. So as I'm living and as I'm watching, I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago that my first presidential election was Barack Obama, my first presidential election. And so I think for me, that was such a win. So seeing what the next 8 years looked like and what happened, sure, it was a little off-putting. And I think that we are now in a space where, yes, things look like getting better. We do have women in leadership positions, but at the same time, we have had women in leadership positions all around the world. Women have been thriving. It's not just now. So I think for me, I think we have a lot of work to do. I think it's almost premature to celebrate. I think it's wonderful to watch Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States of America. That is wonderful. She is the daughter of immigrants. There are so many things that we could say. She went from HBCU. She's in a sorority. There's so many things that we could say about her, and these are all wonderful things. But I think I have to say that it seems so premature, because when we look at what we have collectively as a people, I don't see the progress. And to be quite honest, having someone like Amy Coney Barrett in the position that she is in, for all of us as women, it doesn't sound as though she is progressive and wants to move us forward. It sounds as though anything that she wants to bring with her, while it may sound progressive to someone else, it does not sound progressive to me. It sounds as though she wants us to go backward. And so I'm honestly very concerned about my reproductive health, because I have 2 children, sure, but I'm still in that childbearing age. So, what if? I don't know what the future may hold. And so I think it's very important for me as a woman who is of childbearing age to pay attention to those things. And as I'm paying attention, I'm a little bit alarmed. I'm a lot bit alarmed.
And I agree with Reverend Holeness-Roland.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little alarmed by her being a Supreme Court justice. I think that she will set us back, and I could only go by her record and how she has voted thus far, especially dealing with issues of women's rights, dealing with issues on gun control, dealing with issues on the criminal justice system. So there is some alarm there, and I guess all we can do is just wait and see if she's going to be able to not allow her Catholic faith to dictate the law.
Yes, I understand that. I guess I'm just reflecting on what I have seen in the history of this country, where people we've had similar concerns. When I say we, I mean there were concerns, for example, back in the 1960s when John F. Kennedy ran for president. There was a lot of concern about him using some of his Catholic values and ruling the country with that. And then once he got settled into his presidency, then he set a number of precedents that didn't always line up with those traditional Catholic values. And so I guess I'm just looking at both what has happened historically as well as what's going on today. And I have high hopes that this is going to work against what the status quo intended, especially with the nomination of or the induction of Miss Barrett to the bench.
And I have high hopes too. I mean, President-elect Biden is also a Catholic, but his views is completely different from Amy Barrett's. And so I guess my concern as a woman, as somebody of color, who's concerned with our justice system especially, I just want to make sure that the rule of law is not dictated by her personal beliefs or position, but she's going to be able to rule justly and not project those beliefs into her ruling as she has in the past.
Yeah,
I want to interject. I just wanted to say, I think that for me, if she had not said that she wanted that some things would change, then I would be less alarmed. But because she actually said, when asked what would change, she said, well, I don't think that will change, but this will change. What? For me, how can you even make that statement? And so I think that as a young woman, hearing someone say, oh, that's not going to change, but this can change, that means that someone's coming in with an agenda. That means that someone has preconceived notions, preconceived ideas, a thought process that they live out. And so I think based on that, it's telling me, and we go back to that whole, when someone tells you who they are, do you believe them?
Yes.
That's true. That's true too. That's true. You're right.
as ministers, I think we even understand on a different level. Forgiveness is quite unique. You know, it's not as my son, who is 3 years old, would think that, you know, forgiveness, oh, I say I'm sorry and that's just it. There's so much that goes into that. And so I think she has told us who she is. And it's on us to say, you know, we're going to believe her or we're not going to. And I think that's a reality. So it's almost just how we got together and mobilized to get out the vote. We have to get together and mobilize a thought process change. And it's that just because someone is presented to us doesn't mean we have to believe exactly what they say. We have to go out and fact check. And also, I think more than anything that our people can benefit from is really accepting and learning what my mother told me very early on, and what I truly believed and still believe right now. And which is why I chose to go to Spelman College, and which is why I chose to go to Howard University, because their ice is not colder than ours. And I think a lot of us forget that.
Yep. Very true. Anybody else? I mean, I see both sides of it, and why why there is cause for a lot of speculation on how this latest Supreme Court nomination is going to affect women's rights in a long run. And you bring up a very strong point, Reverend Holeness, about especially the part about when somebody tells you about who they are, you got to believe them, right? So yes.
If I could just interject one thing, I was actually thinking about this today, and I took a glance at the ages of the Supreme Court justices, and there's a possibility within the next couple of years, and hopefully during Biden's term, that someone will retire or someone will pass on. We have, one justice that's in his 80s, and that might present the opportunity for someone else to step in who may be more moderate or more towards the liberal end, and kind of balance it out. But for now, we have to see what this woman is going to do. And I do believe, what you see is what you're probably going to get. And we're just going to have to sit back and see what happens. But I'm looking for the future.
Absolutely. Now, to move on to I really appreciate that. Definitely, you all bring up some great points. So one of the things that, just looking at a talk that she gave, Justice Barrett, that she gave, she said at Jacksonville University, she says, I don't think the core case, Roe's core holding that women have a right to an abortion, I don't think that would change, she said in a talk at Jacksonville University, per NPR. But I think the question of whether people can get very late term abortions, how many restrictions can be put on clinics, I think that would change. And this is something that she said at a talk at Jacksonville University. What are your thoughts on this? I know we kind of had we talked in advance about this. Oh, she put her hand up. She put her hand up. Here we go. Let's go.
I mean, come on. As a minister, you don't want to go out there and say, just go, feel free. Everyone have an abortion, free for all. That you don't want to say that, but who is she? As a woman, I just would think that as a woman, and this goes back to us doing each other wrong. I believe that women are supposed to be there to support each other, to encourage, to help along. I mean, come on, really? Just for her to even make that type of statement leads me to believe that she feels that she has the right and the authority to tell someone what they can and cannot do with their body. And as a believer in Christ, how dare you? Because, but for God, all of what we have is because of God. So she is just a human being, just like each and every one of us. How dare she place herself in that level of authority? And if she is as much of a believer as she says and claims herself to be, she should really know that that's above her pay grade.
Okay. Who said that is above her pay grade? I hear you.
Just above her pay grade.
I mean, you either for or against. You can't put stipulations on it where you
That's
could
right.
only be this month, or if you want it because you can't afford it, that's okay. But if you don't want it because it's a boy, or if you don't want it because it's going to be born with disabilities, or if you don't want it, the point is every woman should have a right to choose for herself, the same way that we have a right to choose whatever faith, whoever we're going to marry. It's no different. And so you can't put stipulations on it.
Right.
You can't put stipulations on it. And I think as women, we need to be in charge of us. And it should not be dictated. And what makes it even more pertinent for me is because she is a woman. And
Exactly.
choosing her, with her 7 children, even if she adopted some biracial children, that does not move me. Okay.
Me
What it
either.
says to me is that we want to go back to the 50s and the 60s. That's what it says to me. Okay. And I was born in the early 70s. And so I want my daughters to be able to choose for themselves and not feel relegated to think that they have to do this or that, but to choose for themselves who they are, how many children they choose to have, whoever they choose to marry. That's their choice.
I would agree that it is a very personal decision. It is a very private decision, and that women should have the right to make their own personal and private decision without the mandate of another woman, who is working against something that women have fought for so long. And again, I'm not saying that everyone, just like my sister said, I'm not saying everyone go out and have an abortion. I'm definitely not saying that. But people should have a right to govern their body.
Indeed, they should.
What's also problematic for me is because of Trump's character. Why did he choose her?
Right.
He appointed her to the appellate court, in 2017? Okay. He could have chose somebody else who was better qualified, who's been on the bench longer, but he didn't. He specifically chose a white female, and I'm just going to keep it 100, okay? Because there are many African American and women of color that could have also been chosen who are better qualified than her. That's number one. Number two, he specifically chose a white woman with 7 children. To me, in itself, I think that there's a statement in that as well. Even though some can say, well, it's a balance. He's going to show how she can have work-life balance, how she could be a judge and also be a mother. But I think because of his sexist and misogynistic ways, I think that there was some underlying reasoning behind his pick of her, especially when other women were more qualified.
And to get her in before the end of his term.
Exactly. When President Obama had 9 months before the election and no one had voted, and she was confirmed 8 days after 50 million people had voted. What was the rush? And not only that, all of the justices he picked. So he did, it's a setup. The courts are more conservative, and who are they going to favor? And one thing that I read about her in one of her statements, especially just dealing with gun laws, she said something like people who are virtuous should only be, and people who are deemed criminals or vigilantes. It's her wording. Her wording did something in the pit of my stomach that made me sit uneasy with her. So it's more than just her views on abortion. It's her, how is she going to rule in other areas of law as well? And what does she really think about immigration? What does she really think about equality and justice for all?
What does she think about Black Lives Matter?
Exactly. And based on what I've read, I'm not going to, it sounded like she's not a fan, and they would be under the militia or those that are not virtuous that she spoke about.
Right. I think people are getting a little bit blindsided too, because she does have the Haitian adopted children. And so that, I think a lot of people are looking at that and saying, oh, well, this is a Josephine Baker story. Not quite. you know? And so I think
Absolutely.
it's different in that Josephine Baker had a lived experience as a Black woman, and she had been discriminated against in her own country by a variety of people. So that is what propelled her then to want to create a better world. And that was her attempt at doing so in her own home. However, that again, she had almost every nationality represented. So I think it's very different. And I think we just have to be a little more clear about, even about the adoption process and how that is lived out and what the implications of adopting a child from Haiti are. I think it's just a lot more pieces that we're overlooking. And I think not paying attention to her religion, I think that is a deficit, because our religion does allow us to have a better understanding of our walk in this world. And so I think that since that is something that she has expressed as something that is important to her, that means that for her, she is living out her walk in that way. So it would be very challenging for her to make a decision that goes directly against her faith, especially if that is informing her walk.
I agree.
Yes, I agree with that also. I agree. I don't. I just the only thing I can say is that I have high hopes. I know a lot of times people do things because um, they have a certain agenda in mind. But I'm just a believer that ultimately there is a higher power that is at work and that can be touched by the feeling of our infirmities, and it's not just watching humans make fools of themselves, but is actually at work. But these are some. Don't get me wrong. These are some great, and I concur a lot with 100% with everything that you're saying. Um, we also have a way to go in terms of what we hope for this current administration. So, given what President-elect Biden and President-elect Vice President-elect Harris, Senator Harris, are having to deal with, what are the I don't know what is your perspective on where they should go from here now? Currently, you know what? Before you answer that question, I'd like to know what you all think about the refusal of the current administration and not wanting to congratulate or admit to the. I see the heads turning. I see them. I see 'em. I would love to hear the perspective and just get some feedback on what you guys think of this.
Well, it brings me back to I guess about 20 years ago with the Gore Bush election, and that we were not sure who was the president for maybe 10 or 12 days, if I remember correctly. And the issue was that the votes had not been counted. The votes are counted. Whether there's some, disguise about what, whether they are or whether they're not, or we're waiting for a few more votes, or now they're going to be recounted here. The majority of the country has said it is time for a change. And there was an interview that the president-elect made where he said, this is embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the world to see the United States in a situation like this. I think that Donald Trump not admitting or conceding to the election, it's also taking away from the running of the country. And it may also put us in a dangerous position, because everyone's putting their attention on who's the president, who's not the president. Meanwhile, our enemies are it's leaving us open, and I think it's a very, very dangerous position. And it also shows on a grand level poor sportsmanship. You don't like the way the game was played, so now you want to change the rules at the end. So at some point, whether he concedes or whether he doesn't concede, in January, they're going to get him out the White House.
Right.
Somebody's going to have him move.
But I think that's what they have demonstrated to us. They changed the rules when it's going to benefit them.
Hello.
Exactly. And for Trump, I mean, he's already demonstrated to us he's not a leader. So he's not going to start being a leader now, when it's almost time for him to leave. But I think that the country has the nation has spoken, right? We do want change. But I think there's other things that Trump may be concerned about. I think he knew from the very beginning that he was going to lose the election. That's why he started months early saying that it was going to be fraud. And I think as a people, we really need to step back and consider the votes that he don't want counted. You know, who are the ones who did the mail-in ballots?
Mhm.
What votes don't he want counted,
And
and why?
right. And you know, it reinforces the whole definition of being a sore loser. Even here in the state of Georgia, we have two United States senators that are questioning the count. Now, it's my understanding at the time that we aired tonight that President-elect Biden is leading President Trump in the race by more than 14,000, almost 15,000 votes. And so it's lessening that margin that where he can call, number one, that we can call for a recount. But the controversy is forcing the Secretary of State, who, by the way, was endorsed by President Trump, to do a recount by hand, okay,
Yes.
of millions of ballots by hand. He's only doing that because he's under pressure by his own political party that's yelling that there's some discrepancy in the count. Okay, so what does this say to me? This says to me it is definitely an embarrassment, and it's definitely an attack on the American democracy and the democratic process. It almost destabilizes the entire Republican Party, and that's not a good thing. Whether we agree or not, whether you're Republican or whether you're Democrat, we need both sides to be operating in stability, and that's not happening when they decide that they're going to be sore losers. So,
No, it's not. And you
Yeah.
know, I was thinking that the sad part of this and is that yes, they are showing us a model of leadership. And sadly, this is a model of leadership that a lot of people follow. Um I'm gonna do what I want to do. I'll tell you what it's gonna be. I'll change the rules when I feel like changing them. I mean, if we look at smaller organizations and even large organizations that aren't necessarily as small as the United States of America, if we look at these other organizations, how are they being run? City governments, how are they being run? Churches, how are they being run? I mean, when you look at all of these things, it's for sure a model of leadership. But I think it's an example that people often forget. And so again, we have to really trust people when they show us who they are. This is a leader who has shown us who he is. He told us from the very beginning that he wasn't going to leave, and that's not something I'm paraphrasing. He said that.
Absolutely.
CNN covered it. Pretty much everyone, all of the, as he calls them, fake news media outlets have covered that statement that he said out of his mouth, not something that they put in his mouth for him. So I think, you know, here watching that whole thing play out, I think it's funny because as a young mother, I'm watching my children do things like this. You know, I'm watching my children behave in ways that are more mature. When one of my children hits the other, they typically go back around and try to hug and make up or, you know, apologize, even if it's after the fact. But here we are watching a president who claims that he's so much smarter than our incoming president behave this way. No apology. No, you know, I've no mistakes on his part. And so I think that for us, what all of us are gonna really have to do is take an inventory of the leaders that are behaving like that. Because just as we're saying we don't want to see it from him, I don't want to see it at the church level either.
Exactly.
Because the same thing that it does to us as a people is the same thing that it does in my denomination. When I watch it happen, it destroys people. It destroys, just like people thought that their votes weren't counted. People going to church, a place that is supposed to be a hospital to heal people, and they get damaged. So I think that this is an opportunity for us to really look at someone, and instead of taking one finger and pointing at someone and the other four is coming back at us, for us to take that mirror up and say, how am I acting like that? How am I living like that? Because this is large for us to see. We can't miss this one. This is a clear example. So I thought it was absolutely hilarious to watch a grown up behave that way with other adults, and then to go and tell someone else that this is a leader. Okay. I thought it was just fun.
And then, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I just view his whole presidency as a reality TV show.
Absolutely.
I mean, because it's just been one comical event after another, one embarrassment after another. He showed us who he was from day one. He was still elected. Okay, his time is up and he has to go.
Absolutely. And what's chilling to me, what is really chilling to me is that I had high hopes that that President-elect Biden would be victorious, right? But I just didn't imagine that the race would be so close. I really had high hopes for like a landslide, or or some of the demographics that voted for President Trump. I was really surprised, like the Latino population in Florida. I was really surprised. They really gave their vote to the president, especially given his views on immigration. I was really surprised at that. So the wake up call, I'm thinking, for America, not just people of color, but for American culture, is that we need to understand that he said it himself, and that probably the only true thing that he said in this whole thing is that 11 million people, more than 11 million people, actually voted for him. And so, and that's
right.
Chilling. That's chilling. That speaks a message to the moral climate of the United States right now, in terms of how Americans feel, how a lot of Americans feel about the status of people of color and those that are disproportionately affected by our within our systems here in America. So it's something that we all need to think about and really consider.
And I'm sorry, Reverend White. I was just gonna say, I wonder, I really wonder, because when we think about it, that's almost 1 for 1, 1 for Trump, 1 for Biden, and I wonder, in that type of America, don't know, but I wonder what it will look like, because we started off the call by talking about grandchildren and future generations. Well, it almost feels like things are at a stalemate, like they're not getting better, but almost staying the same. I don't want to say we're regressing. I don't know, but it really is. I agree with you in that it's chilling just to think of it from that perspective, that we were where we were in my mother's generation, and now we are in this generation, and look where we are. And my daughter's generation, we have no idea. But if we're adding in conservative opinions and thought processes, one would only think that we would be going backwards. So piggybacking off of what you were saying, Dr. White, it is chilling to wonder how, where we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. Where are we going? And as we bring the church and the church's perspective into this conversation, what is the church actually doing? Now, there are studies that have documented that a lot of pastors don't talk about political process. They're not talking about outside of inviting persons into the church who may be campaigning and say a word or two to the congregations, like we do in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. There's not a lot of conversation going on about what should be politically important in our communities. And it's a fact. If you read the Bible closely, particularly in both the Old and the New Testament. The stories of the New Testament are all politically based. And so when we think, we analyze and we break down exactly what is going on in some of the stories in the text, they reek of a political I don't know what word I'm losing the word, but they reek of some type of a political theme to them, if you will. And so we need to be more aware of what's going on, and not just what we see on television, but what do these things that we're seeing? What is the symbolism behind what we're actually seeing in our process? So we've talked about. And I don't want to interrupt anybody else that may have a perspective on that, but I want us to make sure that we're talking about giving a woman's perspective in terms of looking at what's going on in our society today and how it impacts women. And so I welcome any one of you, if you have something different that you want, a different subject or different avenue, if you want to add, let's definitely do that. In the meantime, I see where Trump lawyers are calling for the ballots to be recounted and for mail-in ballots to be thrown out. With the delay in the presidential election, what do you think happened during this time period as we wait for the certification process? Now, the certification process is coming. We know that the Electoral College will certify the votes. There is, as of today, an hour ago, people that are close to President Trump are indicating that he is aware that the election is over. I thought it was kind of interesting that in a press conference with President-elect Biden, someone asked the question, well, there are people in Congress that have not congratulated you yet. What do you think about that? And he gave a nice smile and he said, they will. They will. They will. It's just a matter of time.
I think the issue of his behavior, I mean, it's not like this just happened overnight, but the way his presidency went when he did something that was wrong, where he should have been accountable for it, where the senators, the Republican senators should have stood ground. They didn't. And so Trump got away with so much in his presidency. It was all about him. It wasn't about we the people. It was the Trump show, right? And so now here we are where he does need to concede because he's already lost the election because we the people have spoken. And even though there are persons who wanted Trump, right, and they have to go through their grieving process and mourn that he didn't win, right, because all of our votes are important. But Trump has truly demonstrated to us that he only cares about himself. He doesn't even care about the people that voted for him. It has never been about we the people for Trump. It has always been about Trump himself. The way that he treated, or the lack of respect, to me, in my opinion, that he showed for his wife and his son, just the little things. I think that when Trump moved into the White House, love left the White House. Respect left the White House. When I just look at how other presidents treated their wife, and their children. I mean, I cannot even imagine if there's any laughter in the White House. Oh, and I can only go by what Trump has demonstrated on camera and off.
Yeah.
I have spent many a night praying for the First Lady because
too.
I had such compassion for the position she had been placed in. I'm sure she never would have imagined that she would be, the First Lady, or even knew, what to do. And it's just an odd time. And, she can gently convince her husband, honey, it's time to, to move on. But I think it's time for some serious talk about settling the problems that we have in America. As we're talking, COVID is spreading,
Yes.
and part of that is this regime. Part of this is 22,000 people dying because Trump did not come forward when he should have come forward. And, we're looking at the new the new president-elect, and the fact that he is already mobilizing a team to attack this problem. The whole Black Lives Matter, which is such a big and important movement, Trump just poo-pooed that away. And I think the people are speaking, and as Joe Biden said, he will be the president for everyone, whether you voted for him or not. And I think in this last presidency, we never felt that we were part of his agenda. We never felt that he was serving us as a president. And the important thing to remember is the president works for the people, and that he is, he's our president. We elected him, and that means that he should be working for us. So I think there's some really important things. We've got, 69 days left, but there are some really important things that need to be addressed. And somebody's got to do something about this COVID thing. And if it has to be the next president, all right, then it's the next president. But something has to be done. Lives are being lost.
I agree. And I think it's even more interesting at this juncture because, while we can say he didn't represent us, but sadly you have for the younger generation, you have several prominent rappers who have come out in favor of him, people that we thought the Black story, who produced and wrote films that some people credit as true experiences of Black folks in America. I mean, all of these things, and these are people, as I said, that carry and have carried the culture to the masses. And so I think here we are as people of color, because they were Black folks as well. Here we are really faced with a line in the road where we're really going to have that kind of conversation. And it might have to, it's, as a culture that keeps stuff hush hush, this conversation really might have to happen on social media. It really might have to happen some kind of way where it's not just closed off to us, because this display, I think, has been so great and it influenced so many that, if it's unforgivable to you, then it's unforgivable. And I'm talking about, and I'll go ahead and name them because they proudly said that they are proud of what they feel and their following of Donald Trump. You have Ice Cube, you have Lil Wayne. I mean, whether you like these people or not, they have a huge following. So that means they're influencing people that may otherwise have chosen something different. And so I think here we are as Black folks that we're faced with the reality. What are we going to say? What message do we want to send? How do we really want to push our agenda? And truly, can we push an agenda at this point as a collective? Because are we so divided as a people that we cannot even come together to do that? Because if you're looking at people like the Ice Cubes and the Lil Waynes of the world, that's creating a huge division. It's influencing our people. And where's the church in that? How many churches have decided not to say anything? How many churches have a Twitter? How many churches have an Instagram? How many churches are touching young people at all? And so if that voice is missing, then what? They get stuck with a rapper who, because of his financial bracket, has no care or concern about the people from which he has built his wealth on the backs of. So I think it's, I think we almost have to take a moment of like respite and silence and just have a meditative moment and focus inward and figure out how we're going to build, because the rest of the world may be in chaos, but how are we going to continue going on and telling our little girls to have a sense of pride if half of the Black men don't think that? So, or if half of the Black women feel like in order to be accepted, you can't even be with a Black man, so there's so many layers here and so many points at which I think because I work with young people. So I think there's so many things that I'm seeing that I'm just kind of like, what are we telling them? How do we tell them that we're collective and together when that's not true? So I'm concerned at best.
Well, and definitely in my
how
generation,
we fit into this administration.
In my generation is very concerned about about those types of perspective, Reverend Rose, because we feel a bit responsible for for the things that are happening to our young people. And so going forward with going forward with President-elect Biden and Vice President Senator Harris, what political agendas do you want to see pushed forward? I know personally, because I've read a lot of studies about, number one, about the effects of COVID-19 culturally on our health, not to mention the economy. We definitely know that. I think that's kind of a no-brainer, and President Biden has already demonstrated that. But I would also like to see. I've also read studies that a lot of women are coming out of the workforce because of the things that just out of necessity, and so that could potentially set back the whole entrepreneur strive that women were in the midst of pre-COVID. So I'd like to see some of that agenda to be addressed. I would also like for education to see education be on the agenda, at least for the first quarter or 2 quarters. Why? Because a lot of school systems were forced to go virtual because of the pandemic, and there's a lot of concern about the lag that children will have. And so what is probably needed is more funding and more initiatives to develop the virtual learning techniques. I would like to
Absolutely.
so that our children don't continue to suffer because of that. And so everything happened so all of a sudden until we really didn't have an opportunity. When I say we, I mean education systems did not have an opportunity to develop these virtual approaches to teaching. And so that's probably something that not probably that is something that is needed most immediately, almost as immediate as that should be a part of the plan of getting the pandemic under control, is what's going on with our education system. And not just on K through 12, but in colleges and universities. So from my perspective, those are the two things that I would like to see happen. I'd love to hear what you guys think about, what should President Biden, in addition to the pandemic, what should he be focused on?
I agree with what you said, Dr. White, too. But I also think social justice needs to also be at the top of this ticket because of the civil unrest and the lack of equality that has taken place during this administration, when our young people, our children, our grown men are just being killed dead in the street. It don't matter if they are facing you. It don't matter if they are running away. It's black while walking. You don't know if when your son leaves the house or if your daughter leave the house, if they're gonna make it home. And as a black mother who has a black son, I worry every time he leaves the house. And I call him constantly because of the injustice and the lack of respect for the black body, not just for our boys or our young men, but our girls and young women as well. And so for me, that is key. I think it's time out for inequality and racial disparities. I think it impacts our life. It's not just about money, but it's about our human worth, our human value, how they see us, not seeing us as human. For so long, we have been denied our humanity.
I
Dr.
would agree with.
Thurmond Malone. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. I would agree actually with what both of you had said, and I'm just going to add one piece to that. When we're talking about social injustice and we're talking about, what the effects of COVID and the schools, what I'd like to see is mental health services, because enhanced mental health services, because each one of those things that each one of you spoke about does have an effect on the mental health, the stability of the family. So many people have lost relatives. So really greater emphasis on mental health services. We have yet to find out the effects of COVID. I know that I've treated some people who have survivor's guilt People worry about depression, but survivor's guilt is not that's something that I didn't learn about in graduate school. So, enhanced mental health services, I think that for myself, as an advocate for mental health, I think that would have to be at the top of my list.
Mm-hmm. Or did you have something
And
you want?
I think, oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Dr. White. I was gonna say, I think for me, definitely, I think jobs is a major one. As I'm hearing from a lot of my friends who are mothers right now, those are the realities of their choices. Continue to work or work at home, or not being able to actually live out life work balance at this time. Many of them are impacted by COVID because they have school age children. And then I think also, I agree with you all. Intergenerational trauma is very real, and I know that race reconciliation is important because this country, because of the way that this country was founded, the things that this country was founded on, and the things that this country is living on right now. You can't really move forward unless you deal with the past. You can say,
Absolutely.
you can sweep it under the rug, and sort of that's what we have done. Integration, segregation, mass incarceration, all of these things that are happening right now, that some people, look at others and say, oh, that's because of something that you've done. Well, in reality, that's because of the systemic oppression that they've experienced. And but for the grace of God, that could be any one of us that live
Yes.
this way. So I think that until we address, I think that race reconciliation is a very real thing, because people are building militias to target people of color and others. And so whether they're police officers or whether they've just taken it upon themselves to stand their ground, I don't want to say that a race war is going to happen, but our former president sort of created the energy for something like that to thrive. And then hearing things like a stand by and a stand back, if we don't address that, those people are still out there. 50% of them are still out there. So I agree with you, Dr. Malone, in that we have to deal with that in order to live peacefully and enjoy the human rights that our Constitution is supposed to afford each and every one of us. But I don't think we can move on until we address that. And I do think that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are the ones for the job, because even when they spoke in their speeches, they acknowledged that they saw us, that they heard us, that they felt us. And so I think that knowing that, if they feel us, they hear us, they see us, they understand that there are people that are just moving against us just to be adverse. And so I
Right.
think that, if our government is willing to address the elephant in the room, that's what it is right about now.
That's right. And I appreciate greatly the perspectives here tonight. Uh, and you're absolutely right, Reverend Holeness, that we have to address that elephant in the room. And one other important thing that as we close out, that I want to that in his acceptance speech the other night, President-elect Biden says that that for everything there is a season. So our season right now is it calls for us to address those elephants and begin the healing process. Reverend Roland mentioned that a certain energy had been introduced into the atmosphere, and so I want to be hopeful that President-elect Biden, that the new administration will introduce a new energy for healing, because it is a time for healing for this country. The land needs to heal, the people need to heal, our young people need to heal, our Republicans as well as our Democrats. Our democracy needs to heal. And on that note, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. A special thanks to Kisa Public Radio. And as we leave you, I leave you with these words from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, that justice when injustice affects one, and it affects us all indirectly. Good night, everyone, and thank you once again for tuning in, and we appreciate you coming on. Next week, we're going to talk about climate change, and we're going to talk about what the implications are for the new administration on climate change. Good night, everybody. Welcome to Perspectives On, where we're giving the world a voice. We are a faith-based social justice forum where individuals give their perspectives on various topics. It's an opportunity to express their viewpoint, their stance, and their angle on justice issues affecting the community and globally. Each episode features guests presenting their perspective on things like climate change, the church, urban farming, and food insecurity, all through a unique faith lens.